Alright, we continue with the class for risk management. At least at this point we've managed to see how the risk management process is and to see the benefits of risk management. Now today we're going to look at another important topic which is governance, risk management and systems and controls. So basically all we're saying is that there's risk management governance. Sometimes people think this is corporate governance, but it's totally different from corporate governance. And what are we talking about? We are looking at the decisions that the board makes. Since we've looked at the risk management process, how certain decisions have to be made to mitigate the risk. So for example, the following slides set out the components of what an integrated risk management framework looks like. So we have this pyramid that has got components, taking from the role of the board of directors down to the culture and the resources. So basically, first, let's talk about the role of board of directors. Every company that has grown to a certain size, the running of the company is entrusted in with the board of directors. Now, and senior management, from the CEO, CFOs, coming down to even level management. Now, senior management set the tone and cascade the accountability for risk management throughout the firm. This is entirely why every business that can go into bankruptcy, the blame is not on the whole total staff members, but the blame is on the board. This is why we've seen even in our country, every time there's a change of government, there's a dissolving of the board. Or if a company is not performing well, a parastatal company is not performing well, there's a dissolving of the board. Why? Because the responsibility of accountability in terms of risk is entirely dependent on the board. Now, what's the role of the board? In this case, we say the board sets the tone, which means the board, in this case, most board meetings or board of directors usually meet maybe in quarters, if it has to be in terms of duration per year. They'll set the outline, looking at the vision for the year, the targets for the year. They'll set the outline, and that outline will give from the CEOs and everyone that is involved in the company of what the direction of the company will look like. So, the board will decide, okay, this is the target for risk. This is the target for risk. And the board will decide, okay, what should be our targets in terms of what the risk the company can incur. Now, in this governance or risk management framework, the first component we've said is the role of the board of directors. That's the first component. Now, the second component, we are looking at what's the risk appetite and tolerance. Now, for example, I think from the beginning of risk management, we had outlined what risk appetite is. Just like from food. Somebody's got an appetite for the food they want to take. Now, there's a difference between risk appetite and tolerance. Appetite entails how much risk are you expecting to expose yourself to. Because hunger, we're not saying you've eaten the food. But when it comes to tolerance, you are saying, okay, when risk occurs, how much are you willing to tolerate? So there's that appetite, okay, being high risk appetite, or being somebody being risk averse. So somebody who is risk averse, we are saying they've got a low risk appetite. But there's what we call risk tolerance in an organization. Now, imagine from the whole corporate governance, because the whole corporate governance we're telling, okay, how does operational decisions are made from the board of directors to low-level management. But in this case, that's not our focus. We're looking at corporate risk governance. How does an organization manages risk when it comes to governance? You know, governance, we're talking about how does the firm manages itself using the hierarchy from the board of directors going down. Now, if you look at on the left side, we are seeing accountability for ensuring risk is managed consistent with the risk framework approved by the board. So what are we saying is that you, whether you are already in an established business or you have set up a new business, you'll be the one on the top level management. Because if a business is small, what we are saying is that you may not have the board of directors. Because you are still setting up the tone, what you want the outline of the business to be like. But there comes a point for a bigger corporation that the investors are not there. They've entrusted the control of the company into the hands of the board of directors. Okay. Now, if you look at the other right side, before we go into details, we are saying from the right side, which means from the bottom, we are seeing the confirmation of the effectiveness of the risk management framework and underlying risk and control. What we are saying is that from the low-level operations, those that are at low level of the organization, they are able to confirm that the outline of the framework that the board had given out to say, okay, this is what we are setting as a tone for risk management in the company. Then those at low level, they're able to confirm. So this both works for a small firm and for a bigger firm. Remember, we came out and explained that, okay, risk management is dependent by the size of the company. Secondly, by the kind of activities you're engaged in. The risk you're exposed to are not the same to everyone. You can't generalize that this is the risk. And remember, we even pointed out that there is no structure for risk management for an organization. That is generic for an industry, or rather for any company. Now, let's look at it in details. Now, we are saying from the role of board of directors, the senior management set a tone. Okay, this is what the company is going to do. All right. Secondly, when you look at the risk appetite aspect, we are saying what's the maximum amount of particular risk to which we wish to be exposed. All right. Then we'll look at now. Let's look at now the risk framework. Now, a framework is more of an outline on how risk is going to be managed. What are the policies that are involved? Now, the policies, we're just speaking on the guideline of risk. How are we going to manage risk in this organization? How is the structure? Now, if you check here, it provides guidances to all levels of staff on the way we manage specific risk. All right. So if it's the finance department, you know, later on we're going to look at just a category of kind of risk. It's very important. Category kind of risk, maybe general category of the kind of risk that organization can be exposed to. All right. So on the level of risk framework and policy, all we are saying is the organization must be able to lay out the specific risk. Okay, I'll give you a practical scenario. I was just interacting with a colleague some few months ago. He was working for Barrick Mine. Now, they have got what they call, that's Romana Mine. Every morning, they've got what they call briefings. Now, briefings, in these briefings, one of the things that happens in the briefings is that they have to bring awareness of the kind of risk that is involved in all departments. Right? It being a mine. Now, imagine if an organization you are able to, it may not be briefing on a daily basis, but what if it's on a monthly basis? An organization coming up with such kind of guidance procedures being given to each and every department, that if you guys in the procurement department, this is the focus of the risk you are likely to be exposed to, and these are the do's and don'ts. Because you're looking at governance. How does an organization here govern the risk? All right. How do they set controls? Okay. And it comes to the policies. The policies, what are the guidelines have you put across? You know? If you're setting up the targets in terms of the profits you're about to make, obviously, to get to reach out to your vision, you must be able to set out, okay, the goal of the firm is maximization of profits. Okay, how are we going to lower the cost? Because every risk comes with its own cost. Isn't it? Right. Okay, now let's look at these components. After I've set up the guideline, at this level we're calling this line 2 or line 1 and line 1. Now these two lines, they are broken down into two. One, segregation of duties, and the mandate of the risk function. Now, on the segregation of duties, all we are saying is line 1 and line 2 are aware of their separate risk management duties to the firm. So if there's a particular line, we're going to look at it in details, what we mean even here as we talk about the line. All right. On the other side, we are saying the mandate of the risk function. And we are saying what's the role of the risk management framework. Okay? Including ownership at board level. Okay. Then from there, we'll look at components of risk identification and measurements. Now, remember we looked at, from the previous slide, we looked at the risk management process where we look at risk identification. Okay? But now we want to look at how does top management govern these risks? Because risk identification is key. If you can't identify the risk, you can't measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't mitigate it. Okay, so even as a business, you're the business owner, you're the CEO of a business. You must be able to identify the risk. Now, at this component, we are saying categorization and the definition of the risk, it happens here. You must be able as a firm to categorize, okay, these are the risks. Because already you would have provided guidance to every specific department of a firm that these are the risks that the firm will be exposed to. So you as a department, if it's in the procurement, if it's in the IT department, these are the risks that the organization is being exposed. Now, you are providing now definition, what are these risks? Because as a firm and as management, you must be able to define what kind of those risks. So those people in that particular department, they must be fully be aware of what you're talking about when it comes to risk. Okay. And if you look at the other side, you're saying risk monitoring and reporting. And what do we mean by that? All we are saying is that a suite of risk metrics and information to support the effective decision making at all levels. Now, after you've put up the framework for risk, you must be able to monitor. All right. If we say in the engineering department, you've set up guidelines at the board. Imagine you're into production as a company. You set up guidelines as a board, and you have to monitor. Are really people aware of the risk in the department that the department is being exposed to? All right. And we're also looking at culture. Remember, we talked about risk culture, and we said risk culture. I think this was in the first class that we established that risk culture necessarily is all about how is the perception of people in the organization about risk? Are they aware of risk? Do they value risk management? Now, if you look at the culture, risk culture makes risk management a core element of our culture by considering actions and behaviors. Now, if there's no culture, risk management culture in an organization, then it's like everything moves at its own accord without control. Which means the people in the accounts department can decide when to pay out money to their creditors. All right. The procurement team can decide anyhow how to buy, when to buy equipment. Now, if they are aware about the culture of risk management, they want to relate any form, any room of laziness into the company. Everything that is spending, the company must be able to tackle it in the soonest possible time. Now, that also speaks on the other side of resources. We are saying appropriately skilled resources able to support a growing business and risk management function. Now, we can't talk about risk management without talking about the resources as a firm you have to put in place to mitigate those risks. That takes already an investment aspect. You have to invest into risk management as a company. Even as much as we are looking at financial risk, business risk, also if you look at even at low level kind, let's talk of example, a construction company. A construction company has to provide resources. Safety measures have to be put in place. Right. If it has to take the whole entire finance department to be equipped with skills, that has to happen. Now, they have to have resources. All right. So we're talking about the appropriate skilled resources being able to be rendered to the employees, even as top management. No wonder I've seen even in Zambia, CEOs, people in a certain position being sent out for a certain course just to be equipped. Obviously, even as this course is going on, it's part of this resource equipment. You must be aware of risk management. What is risk management? What are the benefits of risk management? Why? Because again, if you have those resources and you go back to a company, it's like your mind now has been exposed that there's what is called risk management. Maybe what is affecting the profit of my business is not necessarily that I'm not having a lot of customers or the economy is bad. Maybe if I can mitigate the risk that I'm being exposed. Remember, every risk that is overlooked comes at a cost. All right. And you look at one of the benefits of risk management is that it helps the company to maximize its profit. All right. So there's that resource equipping component. All right. Okay. Now let's go into details. Without looking at the slides, what goes in your mind when you look at maybe the role of the board? What's the role of the board? All right. There must be something that clicks in your mind as a business personnel, maybe as an employee in a company, a business owner. What's the role of the board and senior management? All right. John Maxwell said something, everything rises and falls on leadership. If the board of directors in the company can't manage well the risk, then the rise and the falling of the company rests on their head. Now, if you look at this slide, okay, what's the role of the board? The role of the board is central. It approves. All right. Number one, high-level risk principles that determine the risk governance arrangement, particularly at the risk management framework. RMF stands for Risk Management Framework, and risk operating model levels. All right. So as a board, you'd have already selected principles that is going to determine the governance of risk. Okay. Pay department, of course, and as a business as a whole. Then you look at, okay, what kind of operating models are we going to use at all levels? Okay, at all levels. Today I was interacting with somebody. He's into the sales. He's into the marketing team of one of the big firms. Okay. In this case, it being Coca-Cola Zambia. You mentioned something that really got my attention in terms of risk management. Is that every time a car is leaving the premises of the company, they have to counter-check the list of how much stocks have been given for marketing, to take them to their agents. Now, if you look at that component already, that's a risk measure. Okay? Of not letting things just go out unrecorded. Or making sure that what is leaving the stock and what is going on the market is the same quantity. Now, imagine if the company, like Coca-Cola, doesn't know how important just that element, that procedure is. Of course, people may call it just like maybe measure against theft, but there's something more than theft. There's maybe accountability in terms of being able to tell what left in the stock, maybe miscalculations. All right. Okay. So the role of the board, they set the risk culture, the behaviors. Okay. Like I've said, for example, of Coca-Cola, this is how we behave in this organization. In the procurement, in the marketing department, in the accounting department. This is the approval process. Okay, again, another practical example. I've got a friend who works with USAID. Every email that is sent has to be sent to about 3-4 top management. Because information, remember, part of what we looked at as the key drivers of risk in the previous class is that information and technology. How well a company is acquainted with the evolution of information and technology will depend on how exposed they're going to be in terms of risk. We gave an example yesterday of how companies like post office have gone out of business because of being behind with technology. Now, so there's that channel of how an email move will be attached to about 5 different people, and almost every office have to see that approval of that email. Okay, this is how it's been sent. Okay, driver has to be sent out into the field. Okay, the finance department has released funding for such kind. Now, all those is setting up what we call a risk culture. Making sure that information that goes out, it's as transparent as possible, just in case of anything. Okay. High level risk and other performance metrics for senior staff consistent with the overall firm-wide goals. Now, the role of the board is to make sure that if a branch manager for a company is operating in the normal operation of the business, is it in relation to what the organization has set as these are the operations? So you might be starting a business today and you want to put up a simple outlet just within the city of Lusaka, maybe operating from Matero and the other offices in Kablonga. Are you able to set up that there's a consistent staff operation from the 2 branches? Because the misalignment in terms of operation from one branch from the other branch might bring about exposure to risk. Okay, so the board has got that responsibility. Okay, going down. Now, let's look at the role of board risk committee. Now, the role of board risk committee is that the board risk committee have got the following responsibility. Now, remember, there's the board of directors. Okay? From the board of directors sets a team called board risk committee. Okay? And I think this is what we highlighted earlier in this course, that a lot of organizations have missed out on this component because they haven't yet realized the weight that risk management has. You know, we just mentioned about the insurance companies. Okay, though that's their core business, but every organization has to adhere to this element that, okay, risk management is really key in driving the organization forward. Okay, advising the board. So what's the responsibility? They advise the board on risk management. Okay. The board of directors having different people with different experiences, qualifications, and exposure, and the kind of skill they bring to the company. So not everyone will be able to understand risk management. So leaving the responsibility entirely to the board may not be good enough, may not be enough. So we have to come up with a committee called the board risk committee. So they assist the board to foster culture, emphasize and demonstrate a risk-based approach. Okay. Also considering obligatory obligations, like we said, per department. All right. The department really entirely being following the rules and the culture of the company, reinforcing management control consciousness, and making recommendations to the board on all significant matters. Okay, so that's their role. Reviewing the effectiveness of the bank's risk management infrastructure. So in this case, if this firm is under the financial system like a bank, so the board risk committee will be reviewing the effectiveness of the bank risk management infrastructure. So infrastructure, just saying the same framework, risk management framework. That's the infrastructure. How effective is it? Okay, we look at the other component, looking at the role of the CEO. Okay, the board should delegate to the CEO the personnel responsibility for one, inter alia, day-to-day operation of the risk management framework. So that whether it's the bank manager in this case, just using an example of the bank manager in this case, its risk effectively and considered within the overall risk asset process approved by the board. Okay, the CEO normally appoints under his or under her personnel authority the function committee responsible. So now we're looking at, okay, you are a top level organization that has got a board, and the board appoints a CEO. Okay? After appointing a CEO, the CEO has got now these responsibilities. Okay? Now, we've got what we call the executive committee, of course, that can be chaired by the CEO. And this executive committee, remember, we've got the risk committee there, board risk committee. But now at this point, we're having also what we call the executive committee or an executive risk committee, called the CRO. It's very rare, if we look at the structure of the companies, that you only find the CEO, COO, Chief Operations Office, Chief Financial Office. You don't find the Chief Risk Management Office, CRO. All right. Now, CRO, who is the Chief Risk Management Officer, he drives his personal accountability from the CEO's delegations. Okay, delegated authority. He therefore reports direct to the CEO for risk control. Okay, as well as having an accountability to the other board risk committee there, the BRC. The chief risk control officer has got responsibility like the following: one, risk appetite and the risk management framework approved by the board. Okay? Other components, the risk management framework and the policies which ensure that all risks are effectively identified and controlled. Specialist risk teams and skilled personnel. So now, we're looking at distribution of responsibilities. It happens at this level. Alright. Embedded and effective risk management processes. Okay, so it will be part of the responsibility. Transparent and focused risk monitoring and reporting. So now, here, the board has given responsibility to the CEO. The CEO appoints the chief risk officer. The chief risk officer now comes up now to make sure that all these responsibilities are under his office. All right. Provision of independent expert advice. Okay, to the board. So the chief risk officer can go outside the firm. Remember what we said. We said why there should be, just like in the accounting side, we've got what we call external auditors and internal auditors. Now, even in the risk management personnel, we have to have the experts from the outside, because the inside they can compromise. So at least there must be a balance, making sure that the inside risk management team is doing a good job. Now, so the provision of independent expert advice, which means not part of the company. There must be another firm offering such kind of services. Okay. Now, from there, ensuring that effective and controlled decision-making processes exist within the clearly defined governance of the infrastructure. Now, remember, we're having the risk management framework. Now, we're saying that all decision-making must realign to what the framework entails. One, we're talking about the culture, the behaviors, okay? The guidance that has been laid out to each and every department. That is essential. Now, provision of a positive working environment in which risk function is trusted and respected, facilitating the recruitment and development and retention of top talent. Remember, it's a risk, it's operation risk to lose out employees, top level employees. So an organization has to make sure that they're able to retain. Now retention there is talking about labor retention, human resource retention. Little did we know until maybe now, as we're going through this course, that there's a link between HRM and risk management. How? People leave companies on a daily basis and they find it's top talent. Why? Because we don't even know how to manage the risk involving retention of human resource. Okay? And you find this is the job of the what? Chief Risk Officer. Okay. Let's look at this component. Risk appetite, development and approval. The risk appetite, okay. So we're looking at the board expressing the degree of risk which should be accepted in delivery of strategic plan outcomes. Now, the risk appetite definition and implementation process is what we are seeing. So we are seeing from the left side, in these blue boxes, we are saying risk appetite and principles. Where do they take it? They go now to the business plan. All right. What happens here? From there, it goes to the metrics and measures. So these are the measures of risk. Okay? The technicalities, what kind of method we're going to use. Now, if you see from the business plan, okay, as we go down there to metrics, statements and limits. So you have to set certain limits as an organization. This is what we're going to, these are the boundaries of operation, whether it's a department or what. From finance, okay, we can't enter debt of this magnitude. You set up all that. Now, stress testing, that identifies the impact of extreme but plausible events on earning capital and liquidity. The management actions. So the management actions for unexpected breaches of statements and looking at the feedback of information into the risky appetite systems. All right. Now, when you look at that, from the last two, stress testing and management actions, this is where there's a serious testing of whether the business plan is achievable. All right. So you're talking about even when you're starting a business. You can put up, okay, you have a business plan. But management action, talking about the expected breaches of statements and feedback information and the business plan. You have to be able to see, is the core business plan achievable? All right. Now, if you look at the middle structure, just explains, like on risk appetite, what it is. Now, if you look at on the right side, we are seeing the ongoing responsibilities. All right. Like of the board, CEO, Chief Risk Officer, including the last business units. Now, the board continues to review and approve risk appetite. Okay? Since they set the tone for risk management in an organization. So as a manager, as a CEO in the company, you have to be able to know that you are the one who sets the tone, who approves the risk appetite. What kind of exposure of risk is the company going to incur? All right. From there, we look at the CEO. He derived risk appetite and limits in line with business strategy. You've seen now, I think in the first class, we came to establish that a lot of companies usually just mention that, okay, the strategic plan of the business is enough. But look at this. The execution of the strategic plan, which is entirely started by CEO, formulated by the board, okay, this is what the strategic plan is. Execution is given into the responsibility of the CEO. Now, the CEO derives risk appetite and limits in line with the business plan. So the question is, who guides the strategic plan? CEO. But with what tools? Risk management. Because the strategic plan is simply an outline of the execution of the vision from where we are right now. What's the road we're going to use? What are the tools going to be used? And how are we going to get there? We look at the mission statement of the company. All right. But how do we protect that strategic plan? It still goes back to risk management. So at this point, it validates why risk management plays a very important role in seeing the strategic plan of a company being executed. Okay, but from this corporate risk governance that we're looking at, it entirely just look at, okay, comes to provide that protection to the strategic plan of the company. Okay, from there we look at now the chief risk office. The challenges the risk appetite presents to the, remember, the board risk committee, and he has to look at independency of experts being incorporated into providing expertise to risk management in the company and an oversight of risk appetite. Then we look at now the business units, talking about maybe the branches of the company and the like, where the managers to test appetite on a day-to-day basis. All right, risk framework and policy. So this comes again now. If you look at the first part, we looked at the risk management framework, RMF. We are looking at, all right, on the left side, we've got the risk principles. So now, this is the framework that has got the risk principles, risk policies, risk processes, and it has got the key risk being highlighted, the material risk, and even the material risk register. Then on the other side, we've got the risk appetite. All these are falling under the risk management framework, giving to a risk appetite statement. Now, let's look at this process, which we call 3 lines of defense. Okay, now under the 3 lines of defense, we are saying, how do we mitigate risk at that kind of level if we're looking at governance of risk? The first one being risk management itself. We'll look at under the 3 lines of defense. The first line was saying the function of risk management is to undertake the actual activities of the business and take the risk, responsible for managing the risk, and it includes the office and support functions, e.g. operations. Okay, so as a company, you have to develop these 3 lines of defense in order of managing risk. Number 2, so under the first component in the risk management, the first line, we are saying what's their role? They have to identify, assess, measure, monitor, and report the risk. Okay, now when the risk is reported, what comes next? It's risk control, which is in the second line. Here the function is responsible for controlling the risk highlighted, identified, and reported at level 1. All right, and includes risk production, control, and compliance. Coordinates risk policies. This is under the control. Okay, and recommends to the board for approval. Now, what are the responsibility? 1, they advise, they challenge, they control, and they escalate. All right, so a report has been given, then they're able to control that report on risk management. Then the third line, it talks about risk assurance. Now, what's risk assurance? This consists of internal audit functions and responsible for reviewing the integrity of the controls in line 1 and line 2. And what do? They just review and identify the gaps. If the control isn't enough, they're able to come in and say, okay, these are the gaps for the organization. I think we need to put up such kind of structures. And they also recommend enhancements. Okay, what do we mean by recommending enhancements? In this scenario, we're looking at if there's a bigger challenge and it has been reviewed, the organization must be able to get at the place where they are saying, okay, I think this is what we're missing as an organization. Okay. Although based on the 3 lines of defense model, it is also acknowledged that there are no hard, fast dividing lines as to where each line might begin and end. And indeed, there are areas where there might be good reasons for overlapping and exception to be made. Now, this point gets us back to the point that we mentioned, that it depends to what kind of risk you're being exposed to as a business. We can't entirely put up a structure that this is how you manage the risk. But what we're saying is that there's a roadmap, there's a system. As an organization, you can formulate. Even as a business owner, you can formulate a system that will be governing risk. Okay, then the risk framework and policies, we're just looking at maybe the introduction there, the scope. We'll look at what's the overview and operating model. You know, you've seen, there's what we call here top-down and bottom-up. Okay? So, how do you operate risk? If it's top-down, we are saying the management has set up the tone from the board. This is how risk is going to be done. Okay, these are the culture, these are the guidelines. Bottom up, we're saying, how do you confirm the risk? To say, okay, what management has put as to what we should follow, I think it's not good enough, or it's really working, you confirm. Okay, 3, the board of directors, we looked at those committees and the like. Now, this is the whole framework that we looked at the beginning in a nutshell. Organization structure, succession plan, you know, all this. If you look at this component, it's what really comes to feed into the strategic plan of a company. Okay? Because documentation framework, we're looking at ownership. Okay? We have to be able to look at availability of staff awareness of risk, integration into the risk management framework. What are the planners doing for the company? So that we can integrate those plans into the risk management framework. All right? Business and risk strategies. What's the business plan? Okay? What's the risk universe? You know? Risk universe just talks about, you know, the outside, the business environment that the organization is being exposed to. Risk-bearing capacity. Does the firm even have the capacity to mitigate the risk it's currently facing? If not, what can be done? What should be done? All right. Risk strategy. What is the execution plan to mitigate this risk? All right. Then we go to risk appetite now. From risk appetite, we go to capital steering. Now, regulatory capital. Looking at, is the capital enough to sustain the business? Okay? Or are we, you know, if it's a shareholding company, is the major shareholder in line with how much shares are supposed to have? For example, this is the case with the banks. You know, maybe last information I have is that the major shareholder is only supposed to have about only 27% of shareholding in the bank. Major shareholder, 27%. It can be less than that, and it's subject to change as regulations keep on changing. Okay, risk culture, setting the tone from the top. This is how behaviors and conduct should be. Risk and awareness trainings, you know. Most organizations don't do much of this, but this is very key. Stress testing. Okay, liquidity stress. Okay, where are we with liquidity? Business plan vulnerability. Is the business plan effective and authentic? Operation risk threat analysis. Okay, so that comes under stress testing. So this is very key because it tests even the business plan. Portfolio stress testing. If you have looked at, okay, this is how I'm going to invest my money. I'm going to put this, okay, this. Or as a company, this is where we're taking our money. Now, you do stress testing. Because if you don't do stress testing, maybe your portfolio might be under risk. Even as much as you're talking about diversifying. Remember, in the first class, we looked at an example where if it's a parent company having subsidiaries, there must be a component of where you take money into other investment, not entirely into all the subsidiaries. Because what you're doing is that sometimes you are exposed to a limitation or weakness of it, taking whatever the current company has as policies and infuse it into the subsidiaries. Which means if that framework from the parent company fails, even the subsidiaries are failing. And it becomes dangerous like that. Which means if the bigger company goes down, you expect the smaller companies to follow suit. Okay? That's why we're mentioning now that aspect of now being able to stress test the portfolio. How is the diversification happening? All right. Then we talk of risk reporting. Anything that can't be reported can't be tackled, can't be controlled. Okay. So this is the framework. And these are the policies, governing policies. There are about 12 governing policies of risk management. Appendixes. Now, in this, we look at now the risk management process. Like, for example, market risk. How are the interest rates changing? How is the exchange rate? How is inflation? Okay. Credit risk. Okay. How are we exposed to credit risk if you are a lending institution? Okay. Conduct risk. How are we conducting our businesses? All right. For example, just yesterday I was in one of these shopping malls. Oh, it's not really a shopping mall, but it's these supermarkets called Chase. You know, and one of the branches they've really realigned the whole organization structure of their goods. And when I went there yesterday, I was just told, okay, we had to change the system because people were complaining. Now, that goes back to reporting structures. Okay, so somebody reported, the way we're operating, we're likely to lose our business. So if you look at that, risk has been reported. If it can be reported, they came in, controlled situation. Now, he was even attesting that I think we're even increasing our profits now. Why? Because we're slowly losing out customers because of risk reporting. Somebody reported, no, bring somebody effective to come and run the organization, the branch. Okay, so it was talking about conduct risk there. All right? The conduct of the business. So it's important. If it's marketing, how do you handle your clients? It's important. If you don't know how to handle your clients, there's a risk of you not retaining your customer retention. Is at risk. Okay. So basically that's on the policies. Then this comes to summarize now the risk framework there that we saw. Okay. Risk appetite, risk framework, risk policy, specific risk management policies, procedures and manuals. So there are about 3 levels now there. Okay? But this comes not just to come and intensify, okay, on the policy and the framework of the organization. Okay, let's look at the segregation duties. Okay, these we're just trying to go now into details from what we saw from the actual pyramid from the beginning, from the board, with segregation duties. Now, what do we mean? The characteristics set out test where the specific activity undertaken by a particular function should be designated as being within the first or second or third lines of defense. Remember, there's that risk management process, control, and reporting aspect. Okay, so the first line of defense, we're talking about all those components that were there. Which one should come first? Now, at this point, all these things that you're looking on this slide with segregation duties, they have to do with what kind of operation as an organization, what kind of business and industry you're operating in. That will determine that aspect. Okay. Now, if you look at this, now we're looking at the chief commercial director there, having those responsibilities under the first line. Then you've got the chief operating officer, okay, overlooking the works of the IT operations director, insurance director. Now, this is just a practical example, like kind of a company that has grown so big. We've got the chief executive officer. So, under chief executive officer, you've got the chief commercial director, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, and the chief risk officer. That's why we're saying a lot of companies are missing it because they're not able to incorporate this kind of element. Now, look at the job of the chief risk officer. One of the job is insurance and market risk director. Falls under him. Compliance and regulatory risk. We've seen a lot of companies that have been closed down because of lack of compliance to regulations. Okay? Head of operations risk. Credit risk director. Then we've got the audit committee there on the other side, board risk committee, and they've got all those responsibilities up to the audit director. Okay, so duties have to be segregated. What's the job of the chief executive officer? What's the job of the chief financial officer? That's what you talk about. So now, if there's segregation of duties, we're saying then you are really helping to govern the risk that the company is able to be exposed to. Imagine the audit committee is the one in charge of risk management. Already, I think that's what happened the other time when we were trying to look at the difference between risk managers and financial managers. Okay? This answers because of the segregation in terms of the duties. That the people specialize in terms of managing risk. Okay? The role of risk control function. Okay? The role is just broken down into those components. Advisory, coordination, challenge, they must be able to challenge. All right? Say, I think we're underperforming as a company because we're not able to put certain risk management principles. We're not upholding them. Okay? So, those components fall under the role of the risk control function. Okay? Then we look at now in detail, just an overview, the risk management process. Risk identification, very key. Measurement, monitoring, and reporting. The outline there. How do you identify risk? You articulate, provide an assessment, identify the key risk points in an organization. Okay? You analyze your markets, where you're operating in, you analyze your industry, you identify your risk. Then you begin measuring them. Failure analysis, maybe run models. There are a lot of models depending what kind of business you're operating in. Identify data required. Some companies even do research. They go and conduct research just to measure the risk involved. From the research will give them the results. Key monitoring. What are the key indicators? Thresholds. So you set up the limits, monitor the default parameters, stress definition. Remember, we looked at stress testing. Okay? Review and answer questions. Okay, why are we not performing? Why are we making low profits? It comes at risk monitoring. Is there are the risks that the company is exposed to worthwhile being mitigated? We don't have the capacity. Is the internal risk management team able to handle the risk, or we should be able to engage the external team? All right. Then the risk reporting. We're now looking at the portfolio outlook. All right. And here you're looking at, okay, are these risks short-term or long-term? Okay. And be able to report them. Okay, so firms should be able to forward and look into their risk identification processes to ensure emerging risk can be identified. Risk should be captured in a comprehensive risk registers. Imagine there are even companies that put up registers. Okay, these are the risks that the company is entirely exposed. Okay. At this point, we come to the end of this class. I think we'll be able now to pick it up from here, because now we've answered one important question that answers why risk management is important in relation to strategic plan and running of an organization. I don't know if there are any questions. Okay. I think the notes will be uploaded. They were uploaded. The notes will be uploaded. All right. Any more questions? The next class? Yesterday's class. Yes.